introduce Guillermo Torres, who's with Axis as well too. Guillermo is going to give us a few slides, which will provide some.
Those in-person payments that we are doing in the retail stores with our phone, those are considered today as a remote payment. So they are in person. So you can see now that the plastic basically is dying, and we are moving to all these new applications with for the remote payments. Now let's take a look to the digital payment ecosystem. First of all, we want to show you the funding sources. We have cash and check, debit cards, credit cards, bank accounts, and alternative payments. Those are including digital wallets, those are including digital currencies, and in which payment types they dominate. So the example of cash and check, for example, dominates in peer-to-peer and remittance, and also in in-store retail, half of it. So which are those players that allow us to get the ecosystem? So they are banks, they are issuers, there are gateways such as Computop, ISOs and ISVs, card networks, and payment enablers such as Zipmark. And then we also have an increasing number of integrated vertical solutions. So these players have, if not all, most of their business processes digital. That means the onboarding, know your customer, the credit, the authorization, the compliance and reporting, and the risk and fraud control, all of them digital. So now, if we are able to identify what they are currently doing, these players, how they are currently attacking to the market, the traditional financial services are going to be able to identify where they are going to be in 5 years in the digital world. So that's the reason because we set up this panel. So we're going to ask these players how they are doing today and how digital they are.
No, those are certainly a lot of good points. And related to that too, and this gets back to some of more the, what's driving it from an individual and consumer perspective. We seem to be, I would say not entering, but we truly are in an era now where the personalization, right, I call it, of payments, right? We're in that now, and there's a lot of things that, for example, appear to be driving that, from a user perspective. The fact that, you can port all your loyalty points, various forms of e-wallets and payments. What are some of the other things, too, that you feel will continue to drive this more of a, like I said, moving from a very standard way of doing things solely with the bank to a much more personalized and customized way of people handling how they do their payments?
I'm aware that I pay with my data for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so I'm happy that we have P2PE, for example,
Mm-hmm.
at the POS. Nowadays, I don't know if you heard what happened now with Holiday Inn, that they at the POS terminals, I think 2 weeks ago, that they managed to get the credit card data because it was in the company network.
Mm-hmm.
So this would have not happened if you have these security standards implemented. And I think, and that's why I'm a bit scared, and I know it will be coming, is the biometrics. Because I know there are breaches nowadays already with cards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a fingerprint I cannot change. My eyeball I cannot change,
Mm-hmm.
right? My voice I cannot change. If I'm not 100% sure that this data is secure, and it's all about data. Payment becomes the second thing, right, next to it. I am, as a consumer, I'm very reluctant to use these kind of things, right? I read 2 weeks ago, or 1 week ago, that they came up with a master fingerprint. Does it really enhance my trust in these devices? I don't know. So for me, it is all about privacy. But I'm European. Maybe I'm a bit and German. We're a cash-based society. We don't want to give anyone any data about us.
And it's ironic because the credit card networks have, for years, been able, by virtue of the physical location of a POS terminal, to start to get some insights on a particular user of electronic payments. For the most part, that hasn't really been used dynamically, but I think Guillermo told us a little bit about the phenomenon that we have in-store purchases to the extent that stores still exist. If they're done by a mobile app, you don't have that same direct location of the POS terminal.
Is people are looking for an easier way to onboard themselves when they're a new payer. They find that the onboarding process with a credit card is still antiquated. It's the same as it was, when e-commerce was invented. And I think that a lot of times, when we see there's actually a stated preference for PayPal or something like that, it's because I want to avoid having to put my credentials into another place. And so if I can, if I can manage my sign-on and make that more convenient for me, it's all coming from the same bank account. So I think that's one of the benefits that's starting to emerge as sort of a frequent and regular sort of argument. And I think that there need to be more of that.
If you look at the rapid growth today, right, of digital payments, right, which is almost always tied to the growth of e-commerce, are there specific transactions and types of payments that we see driving that type of growth?
I see, especially in Europe nowadays, because we were always very behind, very conservative. Banks are very conservative anyway, right? Before they change the system, but they now start to wake up, and I think that's also why we have more alternative payments in Europe. See also the Alibabas of this world coming this way, right? Because the East is coming west now. They have a lot of experience when it comes to mobile payments. Yeah, WeChat and so on. And I think you mentioned yesterday WhatsApp payments. That will come because there is a penetration. Like Apple Pay, I don't think will take off as long as they do the same mistakes as banks did back then. Right? Banks were always trying to do their own thing with their own client base and not opening it up to the rest of the banks. And this is changing now. And this is what Apple didn't learn. Right? If they would have created a infrastructure together with Samsung and
by the end of next year, will require banks to offer not only interfaces, an API into the payments execution system, but also a new way of strong customer authentication to allow that to occur. So what's been happening right now, you mentioned Sofort in Germany, which has more often than not screen scraping into bank accounts to actually execute the payments. That's all going to be shifted over to a new interface. So will we have payment service providers who are going to start to say, well, I don't want to be a full bank, but I don't have the payments infrastructure, but that's okay because I'll let clients provide me the API and I'll go from there. So those are going to be interesting spaces to watch coming primarily from the traditional banking sector and to see whether they can start speeding up some of that aspect of customer interaction.
I think, I would push back on that assertion a little bit, just sort of in terms of what actually makes a market in the U.S. and Western Europe. U.S. specifically, I think that if you had to bet on a banking infrastructure innovation like same-day ACH driving consumer adoption, that's a non-reality kind of a statement, right? And I think that if anything, the advent or the actual benefit of same-day ACH has been around in the form of debit and PIN debit and things of that nature. And when I look at what I consider sort of bare payment rail type of applications like Venmo or Square Cash, those are not businesses, right? The big block, it's like, oh, no one's going to download an app for every merchant. They actually are. They're okay with it because they know what the benefits are and they understand it, and payments are built into that. And I think that the mentality that the banks need to, over time, espouse is we will be the supporting layer for products like that. right? And we will continue to improve our services and offerings, such that more and more products like that can be built at a lower and lower cost.
What prevents WhatsApp to become the WeChat of the US? I don't know. I think if they are smart, they will look, yeah, and see how can they achieve that. Now, my preferences really is that banks are taking this role, because I really think, like you said it, me as a European, maybe it's just because I'm European, I just log onto my banking app and I want to be able, no matter where I am, to pay with my banking app, right? And like in the Netherlands with Ideal, the merchant offers it on their website.
Yeah, it's a good point. So I think, like you said, certainly the interest rates, right, have limited that, but also, like I said, I feel they've invested a lot in capturing the data, and they've got a lot of data, but they just really haven't done the proper use of it.
There's a regulatory block as well, right? In terms of what they are allowed to do with their data, but that doesn't stop them from tying up with merchants who think that the level 3 data is theirs, and actually driving forward on joint value propositions. But that hasn't happened because the business pressure isn't there, right?
What's next, right? Given some of the foundational information that Guillermo shared and the initial panel discussions that we've had, when you look at some of the motivations, right, that are driving banks to sort of rethink their strategies, and some of the things that we've at least mentioned, but go into a lot of detail on, like you look at some of the things that are happening, such as the disaggregation, right, of the financial services industry and payments industry as a whole, some of the regulatory issues such as PSD2, and other key things, both regulatory and operational. What are some of the things that you feel are forcing the banks to kind of rethink their strategies for that payments?
If you think of some of the countries that have a relatively large unbanked population and have been visionary about increasing access to electronic financial services, I'm thinking of Mexico, for example, that has a 4-tier KYC regime that had been introduced a few years ago, which streamlines customer onboarding for certain lower value accounts. And perhaps some of the learning from countries where that's occurring, I can think also of India and the Aadhaar system, that we'll start to see some innovation kind of flowing in reverse across these international remittance corridors back to countries where the remittances are originating, and so just kind of it'll be inevitable that some of these innovations will hit the shores of Western Europe and the U.S. to innovate there.
Absolutely.
Yep. One last panel question, then based on time, we'll move into open Q&A and discussion. And the last one has to do with when what we're seeing today too, right, with a lot more specialization. It's not at the consumer level, but at the merchant level, right? Do you see, when the more specialized types of offerings, payment offerings, winning out over sort of the traditional, dumb terminals? In fact, will we see how? That's not right. It's not an if, it's a when, right? When's it going to be where you don't see those things anymore? And how do you see the acceleration of bundled offerings, right? Payment offerings that are designed, and this gets back to the ecosystems all pairing together to offer merchant for a merchant segment specific or a vertical specific segment, winning out over what we've been traditionally used to seeing.
I mean, you go through your process and you choose that. Then the payments decision becomes secondary to that and has to support the initial choice of software. So what we're seeing is that the integrated payment providers are winning those dollars. And I think that increasingly as platforms and marketplaces enable small businesses, if you want to start a car service company, you start by being an Uber driver, right? So whoever is processing Uber's payments, getting all of that, right? If you want to run a B&B, you get on Airbnb. So that's where those payments are going. But even in a more traditional sense, those are the more radical parts of the market. In the more traditional sense, we've seen the integration of payments deeply into hotel management software, medical practice management software. I've seen it. You know, we have a client that does specialized software for racetrack management, right? And so you know, we've got you know, event management software with integrated. And
so like I said, we've as we said earlier, we budgeted some time now for us to go into, you know, some open Q&A. And just to summarize, right, we started off with, you know, the background that you know, Guillermo had provided to us in the overall payments industry and some of the different aspects of that, and then going into you know, sort of where we are today in the current state, talking a bit about some of the new behaviors and market drivers, and then talking about, you know, what's next and where things are heading.